Welcome to the workshop of building web pages and apps. In this workshop, we are aiming together to learn how to make web pages and apps. Some of you are interested in making web pages and some of you are interested in making apps. But there are some frameworks which help you to make an app using the same website code. Isn't it interesting to put effort once and have both our app and website ready? That framework is Ionic. We will learn it in this 2 days workshop. So our workshop will be for 2 days, 8 hours in total, and divided into 4 sessions. Today, we will have 2 sessions for building web pages from scratch, and tomorrow we shall learn how to make an application. So stay with us for 2 days and you will have your web page and a basic idea of how to build an app by the end of the workshop. We are a part of an organization that focuses on automating vision and speech tasks. We have been in this field for the past 2 years. Our team comprises of individuals from multinational corporations like Sony and Adobe. We also like to teach and share what we have learned, this workshop being one such initiative. Today, the workshop will be taken by Mayank, Pragya, Rahil, and Shantanu. I would like to set some guidelines before we proceed. Handling everyone's doubts while the concepts are being delivered is difficult. Hence, we would like you to message us your doubts and any errors you face in the chat box. We will try our best to help you to resolve it. We will be following the schedule already provided to you via mail. Well, first of all, let's talk about why we should have knowledge about building a website and an app. Having a well-designed website that describes what you do describes your personality much more strongly and sends a clear message to people that you are serious about your career. And it is a much better platform to showcase your work than a resume. Employers want to know your experience and projects, but they also want to know what it's like to work with you, and it is easier to convey with a dynamic website than a piece of paper, and hence increasing the chance of you being hired than any other person. So, before we get to what is HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap, let us try to analyze a very popular website. For the demonstration, I will be taking Facebook. You must all be familiar with Facebook. Facebook is a very popular messaging app. So I'll open my Facebook account. As you can see, this is the dark mode of Facebook, and you can see there is a structure to this website. On the left side, there is the side nav bar. Here you can see I can post whatever I want here. These are some buttons which will open the messenger, the notification, the drop down showing my account details, and so on. You can see all posts coming in the center. So there is a structure to this website. Moreover, each button looks a bit different. You can see that this messaging button is quite different to this feeling or activity button. So there is a style also applied on this structure. A button is like a structure, whereas how it looks is the style. Moreover, some logic is behind there that if I press on this text input box, what will happen is that I can create a post. So there is a logic also present in this website. If I click on the messenger, then the messenger would pop up. So these are some of the things which compromise a website. There is a structure to the website. There are styles which make the structure look good, and there is a logic to the website. What should happen if you click on this? So that is how a website looks and is made. First, we'll try to understand actually what this part of the website is. So facebook.com, that's the domain name of the website. So the domain name is a very unique identifier which a company, let's say Facebook, has bought. Now, you can have a lot of subdomain names. Like here, we are seeing www. Now, Facebook has also provided us with a subdomain named M. Let's open this m.facebook.com. So you'll be able to see this subdomain shows a very different view than what www.facebook.com shows. You may have even noticed if you open gmail.com, so you can see here mail.google.com. So you're opening the mail, shows you the mail page, whereas using www.google.com will show you the search, the base homepage of Google. So having a different subdomain name, you can have different websites being shown on that. Next, so as we are now clear with what domain name is and a subdomain name is, let's try to understand how this website would look if I keep on shrinking it. So yeah, you can see when I'm trying to shrink it, the content also stays in the center. That's part of the style. Now, when I keep on shrinking it, what do you think would happen? If I shrink it more, two things can happen. One is that this post also starts shrinking with it, but it would not look cool because let's say there is an image present here in the post, then that too would start shrinking and it might not look good on the screen. So the other thing which can happen is this site nav bar can collapse, meaning it will disappear. Let's see what happens. So as you can see, first the post do start decreasing. The width of the post starts decreasing, but as we keep on shrinking the width, the side nav bar also disappears. If we keep on shrinking the width more and more, the right nav bar also disappears. So this is being a website being responsive. This is what it means for a website to be responsive. It means that it will work on all kinds of browsers and platforms. This is a must for modern browsers as people have lots of devices nowadays. Someone might be opening a website on a TV, someone might be opening a website on an iPad or on a browser or on your mobile phone. So your website should look good on all those possible platforms. So your web browser should be responsive. Now, I have not yet used a term related to websites like what is HTML, what is CSS, what is JavaScript. So I'll try to make you understand what HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are. So HTML takes the structure. So that here there should be a side nav bar. Here there should be a side nav bar. The post should there is a post that is all decided by HTML. How the post should look, where the post should be aligned, like this is aligned in the center. What should be the color of the background? How should the buttons look? These all are decided by CSS. So the styling is done by CSS. Bootstrap is a good library which has some inbuilt CSS code which helps us to write our style, our HTML. Moreover, if you want to create many websites, then there is always some boilerplate code which you have to write. So you have to keep on writing the same things, the same styles and everything on different websites. So there are platforms which do not require you to keep on writing the same things again and again. These type of platforms or frameworks are really useful in the sense that if you write how one post should look, you don't need to write the same code again and again for different posts. So Angular and React are such kind of frameworks. So that's it. I believe you have a basic knowledge about what a domain name is, what a subdomain name is, what it means for a website to be responsive, what is HTML, the structure of the website, what is CSS, the style of the website. Bootstrap is a library which has inbuilt CSS code, and Angular and React are frameworks which help you to create your website faster. Next, let's try to understand what GitHub pages are. So most of you have already made your basic hello world on GitHub pages. So first we'll cover is why do we need to use GitHub pages? The next, where do we get our own domain name? So if you recall, the domain name was facebook.com. Here in this URL, the domain is github.io. The subdomain in the website you made, the hello world repository you made on GitHub, was your username. The protocol is HTTPS. So the question comes, why do we need to use GitHub pages? So now if you make your homepage, you want people to know about, to visit your homepage. So for that, you need a unique identifier. So now what GitHub does is it provides you that unique identifier and simultaneously also links the URL to your repository. Now, if you don't want to use GitHub, you can get your own domain name. It should be unique. It should not already have been bought by someone. And if you have your domain name, then you need a server to point that domain name to. So domain name is a human readable github.io, mine github.github.io. It's human readable. But servers have an IP address attached to them. So you would need to point that domain name to the server IP address where you'll need to host the website, where you need to write the logic. What should happen if someone tries to access this IP address? I should serve them back a website. That logic should be written on the server. We won't be getting to server-side coding. What we'll focus here in this workshop is the user-side coding on how to show a web page, how the website should look. Some of the popular domain providers are Google Domains and GoDaddy. So if you want your domain name, you can get them from Google Domains or GoDaddy. So let's start our first session on HTML. We talk briefly about how a website can be broken down, the structure, the design, and the logic. HTML, which is Hypertext Markup Language, defines the structure of the website. It is sometimes used to even design the website, but we will look into CSS later on, which gives us a lot more control on how a website looks. Let us have a look at how we are going to approach learning HTML. First, we'll be learning about the structure of a standard HTML code. So, on the left-hand side, you can see the standard HTML code. On the first line, you can see that a doc-type HTML tag is there. What this does is that HTML has a huge history. So, HTML, there are currently now, the version used is HTML5. So doc-type HTML says that the website we are going to write is written in the HTML5 code. If you want to specify a past HTML version, then you have to specify the version in this tab. Next, we have the HTML tag inside which the entire code will go. Next, inside the HTML tag, we have the head and the body tag. First, I'll cover what head is. So head is the part of the section of the code which is run before the body. So this has several advantages. Let's say you want to import a library. We'll get to what a library is, but let's say you want some of the contents to load first, and the body depends upon what the content is. So you want the content to be loaded before the website starts getting displayed. All those code, you want that to be inside the head. You can also specify the title of the website, which is what is seen in the browser tab inside the title, which is inside the head. Next, the body. The body is loaded after the head gets loaded. So whatever content, how the website should look, and the main structure of the website is inside the body. So you can put all the structure you want inside the body. We'll come to what H1 and P are in the next slide. Let's first understand some HTML elements and what are their uses. So first we'll have a look at the P tag, which is the paragraph tag. Next we'll have a look at the anchor tag. Next we'll have a look at the header tag. Next the button tag, the text area tag, the input tag, the break tag, the image tag, the division tag, and the span tag. You may have noticed that in the first column, we have tags which end with slash P or slash A or slash H1. In the second column, the first three, the input, the break, and the image, don't end with slashes. Division and span also end with slashes, and I have kept them separate because they are a bit different from the rest of the tags. So let's start with what the P tag is. So the P tag, as you can see, the definition and the usage. So the definition is that the P tag is used to define a paragraph. Now what it means that in an HTML code, if you write your text, and even if you press an enter key, while displaying the web page, there won't be any enter key in the text. If you want to enforce that there should be a new line, then you should use the P tag. For each paragraph, you use a P tag so that there is a new line after each paragraph. This is the example usage of the P tag. Next, the A tag. So I'll just give you a brief idea about what the A or the anchor tag is. It's used to define a link. Now your web page would have lots of links, let's say to your resume PDF or to your GitHub account or to your LinkedIn account. So how do you add a link to your HTML page? So as you can see from the example, yeah. So you define an A tag, and the A tag has an attribute href. So inside the href, you can define your link. Now, between the /A and the A tags, you can write the text. So when you write this in your HTML code, which we'll be seeing later on, you just see visit the work page text. And when you click that text, you will be redirected to workshop.autonise.com. We'll have an in-depth look later on while making our own website. Next comes the header tags. So as you can see in the example usage, defining the H1, H2, H3, and H4 tags lets you change the font size of your text. Later on, you'll also learn how to change the font size using CSS, but these are some predefined HTML tags which you can use without using CSS. You can see in the right hand side, there is a display of how these would look in an HTML page. Next comes the button tag. Now your web page would have a lot of buttons. So links, what they do is they redirect you to another page. Buttons can do a lot more things. They can also redirect to another page. They can also do some other things, like if you press a button, then a message may be sent on Facebook. If you press a button, then a new post may be submitted, and so on. Its example usage can be seen below. So you have to define a tag button. Inside that, you can define the type as button. Whatever text comes in between the button and /button tag is displayed on the button. If we want, so on the button, if you click it, an event is triggered. We'll discover what an event is in the JavaScript session, but you can just imagine that whenever a click is done on the button, a specific event is triggered, which will call some code. If you are familiar with coding, a function is called when another function calls it. But here, with user feedback, we can call a function which will let you do stuff like submit your post or send a message and so on. Next, let's have a look at the text area tag. So what the text area tag does is that it lets you feed in text inside the HTML web page. Now, you can define text using the /p tag. But if you want the user to manually put the text, you have to use the text area tag. You can see the example usage, the text area. There are two attributes, rows and columns. So now rows defines what would be the height of the text area, and columns defines the width of the text area. Inside this text area, you can add infinite content, and you will get a scroll bar which will allow you to scroll down and see the text. We'll have a look at this also in the JavaScript session. Whatever you put inside this text and slash text area, that will be displayed by default, but that also can be edited by the user. Next, we have the input tag. The input tag also allows you to enter text, but it can also allow you to do a lot more things. Like the input tag can be used to upload a file, to enter a password, to enter a text, to create radio buttons, and so on. This is mainly used inside a form to send data to the server. Instead of server, you can think of it like it's used to send data to the person who is providing you the website. So let's say you want to have a feedback form. So you can provide a feedback form, and when the user enters the data and presses the submit button, all the data present in the input tag is sent to you. Next comes the break tag. Now, the break tag is used to insert new line inside the paragraph. Now, what can happen is that after every line, you want to have a new line. You can achieve this by using the /p tag. But then the code would become really cumbersome because after every line, you need to put a /p, then a p, then a /p tag. Instead of that, you can just create a big p and a /p tag, put all your text inside it, and whenever you want to have a new line, you can add this br tag. This br tag does not have a ending tag, so you can just use the /br and it will break a new line. Next is the image tag. We will be using this a lot because we want a website to look pretty, and images are better way to convey your personality and your ideas than mere text. So how to use this image tag? As you can see from the example usage, the image tag has the source attribute, alt attribute, the width attribute, and the height attribute. The source and the alt attribute are necessary. What the source attribute does is, it shows the image which is available in the source tag. So in the source attribute, you can see I have put the link https://bootstrap.com. This image is an AI logo. So in this tag, the AI logo, which is fetched from this URL, would be displayed. Now, it can be so that your browser was not able to fetch the image. So what should the browser do? It will display you an alt tag instead of the image if the image is failed to load. Also, you may need to specify the width and height of the image you want to load. Let's say the image is very large, but your browser does not, your desktop does not have the capability to show such a large image. So you can set the width and the height of the image to be fixed, which will show the browser what should be the size of the image you want to show. Now the last tags are the div and the span tag. They themselves actually don't change or structure the HTML much, but You can add CSS classes or CSS style to div and span, which will allow you to change the contents styling. These will be more clear after we have gone through Bootstrap and CSS. So we'll go into depth and we'll be using them a lot in the later section. There is just one difference between div and span, is that div is a block element while span is an inline element. So what does block and an inline element mean? So the block element, it means that this, let's say you keep a div tag, it will always start from a new line and take the entire width available. So if your browser is like 1000 pixels in width, it will take the entire width of your browser. Whereas if you use the span element and you put inside it some text, let's say this is a workshop, it will take only the width taken by the text. This is a workshop. And it does not start from a new line. So you can have multiple span tags, but they might all go in the single line. Whereas all div elements would start from a new line. That is just the difference between div and span. We'll be using a div lot in the later sections where we'll see in depth how div elements are really useful. So that's it. These are the most used elements in HTML. There are a lot more like form and some rarely used tags. We won't be covering them here right now, but you can always Google them as you come across them, or you need some functionality and you believe it might already be present. You can Google and search like how to do this or what is the form tag, and you'll get good examples which will help you to write your HTML code. So now we know what HTML is. It helps us in defining the structure of the website. But does just having the structure look nice? I'll show you some examples of the tags we have seen so far. So first of all, create an empty realtime.html file anywhere you want on your computer. Next, I'll open it with Sublime Text. Here, I'll write some code. Let's say the same codes I had shown you in the slides. I've changed the text to this is a button and I'll save it. Cool. So now you can see I have first have the image tag with the source set as https://workshop.ordness.com/static/ai.png. This URL points to an image. Next, I have a button which has this is a button text inside it. Let's see how it will look in a browser. So I'll open with other application. I'll choose Google Chrome. Yeah. So it opened. And you can see this is how it looks. You can see that this is a button. It's not styled nice. It's a button, but it does not look really nice. Also, the image is unresponsive. So when I even try to change the width of the screen, the image size remains the same. I might have wanted that this image shrink when the width of the browser shrinks, so that in a mobile, this would have looked nice. Let's see how it will look in a mobile. I'll press F12 to start the debugger mode. Next, I'll click this button to start the mobile mode. This is how it will look in a mobile phone. Okay. So now we learn how to style these images and this button so they look nice. So what I'll do is, let's start writing some code. You may have noticed that I have completely ignored the standard template of HTML, which we had seen earlier, which contained the HTML tag, the head tag, and the body tag. So you can write your code like this also, and the browser will show you the results of the code. But it's better to have the head, the HTML, and the body so that your page is structured and you have the advantage of loading some things, some libraries in the head before they are displayed in the web page. This was a very simple example, but in more complicated examples, you may want some things to be displayed earlier and some libraries to be loaded earlier than the page starts loading. So it's always better to start with the template. So first of all, we'll have the doc type, which will set as HTML. Even if you don't set this, by default, the browser will take the latest, which is the HTML5 version of HTML. So I'll remove this or I'll comment it. Next, we have the HTML tag. Inside the HTML tag, we have all the code. Next, we have the head tag. You can see Sublime Text provides you with some suggestions. All good editors provide you with suggestions like VS Code and so on. We have the title. Let's set the title as Learning CSS. Next, we have the body, in which let's put a header. This is a header 1. Let's put a paragraph 2. This is a paragraph. And let's put another paragraph. This is another paragraph. Let's see how this will look in a browser. Yeah, so this is how our content looks. The first one is the header. The next is the paragraph, and there is another paragraph. You can see there is a new line here which was added because we are using the paragraph tag. If I don't use the paragraph tag and add an enter like this is after many new lines. Let's save it. I'll refresh this code. You can see that the new lines were ignored. If you want new lines inside this, then you should use the break tag. I'll save this and I'll reload. You can see that 2 enters or new lines were added. Now, let's say we want to center our content. We want the header to be centered, the paragraph to be centered in this website, and this paragraph also centered. So there are 3 ways to center using CSS. Now for styling, we need to use CSS. So as you could see in the presentation, there are 3 ways of styling using CSS. The first one is directly applying inline. That's the easiest way to apply CSS. So let's see how to do that. So what I'll do is in H1, I'll put a style attribute. In this style, I'll say text align should be centered. You can see I am getting some suggestions. So Sublime Text automatically gives me some suggestions so that I don't need to remember everything. Moreover, if I press C, I'll get this that there's a center option available with text align. So I'll center it. Now let's see how this looks in the browser. I'll refresh this and wow, you can see that the header was centered. So that's nice. What I'll do is I'll keep the code side by side. It's easier to understand what's happening. Next, we have another way of applying CSS. Let's say we have a lot of paragraphs. We have 2 here, but let's say we had many more. I'll just copy this. Now refresh. Now to apply this to all of them, I'll have to keep on copy pasting this for so many paragraphs. I don't want to do that. So let's say to apply the center attribute to all paragraphs, what we'll do is we create a style tag. The type should be text CSS. Even if the type is not specified, still it will work. Next, we type P. P means paragraph. Then we have curly braces. And inside this, whatever CSS I defined will be applied to all paragraphs. So the CSS we want are text, align, center. Let's save this and see what will happen. Nice. Now all the paragraphs are center aligned. This is really nice if you want every div of a specific kind to be center aligned. There is one more way to apply CSS to an element. That is by creating classes. So inside the style tag, we can specify our class. Let's say I'll specify my class. You can see that I have put a dot in front of my class. Having a dot specifies that my class is a CSS class. Now what I want this class to have is text align center, but I can also apply many other things like text. Let's say I want the color to be blue. Now let's refresh this. You won't see any change because my class has not been applied to any element. What I'll do is I'll comment this P tag. Let's refresh it. You'll see that all the paragraphs are again by default left aligned. I'll apply my class to the first paragraph. So I have added a class attribute, and inside that I have written my class. You can notice that I have not put the dot sign when putting the class. And I'll refresh it. Wow. So now the blue color has come, and also this paragraph is center aligned. So if you want to apply many types of CSS to the same class, you can do that and specify that in the paragraph. So this is how you create classes for CSS. So the first way is to inline specify the CSS. This is not good because sometimes there might be tens or 20 types of CSS you want to apply to a single header. So that would make the code look really bad. So usually, even if you want to just apply one CSS, you try to make a class for that. My header class. So it's not in the style, it should not go in the class attribute. Next, another way we learned was by directly making all the elements of a specific kind to be centered. We did this by not using a dot when defining the class in the style tag. So if we do not use a dot, it means that we are trying to access the element. So the P element would be center aligned. Let's save and refresh. So you can see all the paragraphs on a center line. And another way was by using class, as you have already seen. Next, now you can define a lot of CSS, but defining all the CSS here would look really bad. If you have, let's say, hundreds of different kind of classes, putting all of them here would make the code go like 2000 or 3000 lines. And then trying to find out one class would be really uncomfortable. So maybe we can put all of this in another file and then import it. Let's see how it's done. So what I'll do is, first of all, I'll show you a BootStrap CDN where you can find the CSS library. So first BootStrap CDN. I'll talk about what CDN is exactly later on. First of all, just let's concentrate on how to import CSS. So this is the CSS link. I'll copy it. I'll show it to you. Just a second. Yeah. So I have set the URL found on this site, and you can see this is the CSS. It might look garbage to you right now, but see, I can find the first curly braces, and I'm not able to find, but you can, yeah, this would be it. So there are, this is just plain CSS, but it has been minified, or the new lines and spaces have been removed to reduce the size of the file. So this is a CSS file. What we'll want is, we'll want to import this in our code. So how do we do that? So I've already found this code. And instead of this, let's use this. So let's get to know what exactly are we doing here. So Bootstrap has provided us with this CSS library. We'll get exactly what Bootstrap is and how they are doing it, what's a CDN and all. But let's focus on how to import a library. So first we have the link tag. Link tag is used to import CSS libraries. Next, we have the red slide sheet. So this is a style sheet. Next, we have the link to the CSS code. If this is the same link for the library we have. Okay. Actually, there's actually copied integrity also. Let's just copy this. Yeah. So this is the code. This is the CSS code that goes inside the href. Next, we have integrity. We'll talk a bit later on what exactly integrity is. You can ignore this cross-origin anonymous. It's a bit complicated to understand that. Right? If you want to import a CSS library, what you need to focus on is the href. That's the most important part. Even if you don't have the integrity and the cross-origin part, this will work just fine. So now, this is how you import a CSS library. Now, even if we have not defined this my header class, I'll use, let's say, text center. Now, this class has been defined inside this library. They have a text center, curly braces, and they have put text align center inside it. Now, how do I know this? I have read the documentation of Bootstrap, and there I have found out that to align a text in the center position, I should use this class. So what I'll do is I'll go and refresh. And just a second. So to have the CSS, I should also import all the other libraries too. So I'll have to need to import JavaScript and JavaScript bundle. I'll not do that right now. But the point was that if I had, let's say, a text center class defined inside that library, which said that the text align should be there, then this header one would have been centered. So that's it about CSS. Now what we'll do is we'll try to learn some basic CSS commands, which are the most commonly used. So some basic CSS properties are width, height, background, color, font size, text align, padding, and margin. We'll have a look of them and see how they work in the browser. So first of all, I'll remove all of these. I'll also remove this. Yeah. So now we have a blank template. Let's start writing. So first of all, remember I had said earlier that div and span, these are two elements which are different from other elements, in the sense that these div and span, they themselves don't have any styling. But what you can do is you can apply CSS to the divs, and all those elements which are inside a div would get the same CSS styling. Let's see how it's done. So I create a div, and let's say I apply the style text align center. So now, whatever heading, paragraph, or any other element I create would have the attribute text align center. Let's create a header. Let's see how it will look here. So you can see this header is center aligned because the div it will belong to is center aligned. Now let's import an image. We'll see how to set width and height of an image using CSS. I've set the href. Now close it and let's see how it looks. Yeah, so as you can see, it's centered because it's also inside the div, and the text align center also applies to the image. Even though it sets it's a text, but images are also center aligned using text align. Now, what we want is this image to look a bit smaller. How should we do that? So go on style, and I'll type width, and I'll set width to be, let's say, 100 pixels. I'll save it. So you can see that the width has been set to 100 pixels. I did not specify the height. So how could the height also change? So the height is automatically set to auto mode, which means that it will try to change the height so that the original ratio of the image of the height and the width is still the same. But you can manually override it. So I'll put a semicolon and I'll specify another CSS property, which is height. And I'll set it to, let's say, 200 pixels. And I'll refresh it. You can see that the height is 200 pixels and the width is now 100 pixels. That's why this image looks a bit stretched. So this is how you set the width and height CSS properties. Next, we'll have a look at the background property. So what I'll do is I'll create a paragraph in which I'll put the style background. You can use the background property to set the color of the element. Let's say I use the color yellow green. Yellow green is a color, you'll see how it looks right now. Also, I'll set the text color to be blue. So to just specify color, it means that the text color is blue. Let's write some content sample. This is a blue text. And I close this paragraph. Let's see how it looks. Yeah. So this is a yellow green color. The entire div has the yellow green as the background. The text is of blue color, and it's center aligned because the div is center aligned. So now you know what background is and what text color is. Next, let's go on to what padding and margin are. I'll create another div and I'll put a paragraph inside it. Let's say I style it to a color of white. Right. This is another paragraph. So as the color is white, I don't think this text will be visible. Yeah, it's not visible. Let's give the div some color. So I'll set the background color as blue. You can see as the div is not center aligned, so this text is coming on the left. It's of white color and the background is blue now. So what I want is there is a by default there is some padding in between them. What I want this to increase the space between them. So there are two ways of doing that. You can add a padding or a margin. So what are the difference between two? We'll have a look. First of all, let's add a margin. I'll put a margin. So there are a lot of properties starting with margin. Margin top, bottom, right, and left. So you can set the margin of top or bottom or right or left using these properties. So I'll set the margin top as, let's say, 50 pixels. Let's refresh it. So you can see this div moved down by 50 pixels. So this is how you set the margin. If you want to set the margin left, you can do that. Let's set it to 50 px. Let's refresh it. And you can see there's a margin of 50 px on the left hand side. This is how you, if you want to put space between two divs, this is how you do it. Another thing which you can do is set the margin itself to be 50 px. So the margin in all directions would now be 50 px. You can see the left, the top, and the right, and the bottom have a margin of 50 px. You can't see the margin at the bottom because the space is empty. Now, let's see what padding will do. I'll first remove it. This is how it looks by default. If I add a padding top of, let's say, 50 px, let's see how it will look. See, you can see that the text did move down by 50 px, but the background is blue. What does this mean? So padding means that the div inside itself has a 50 px padding, a space of 50 px. A margin of 50 means that on top of the div and this div, between them, there is a 50 px difference. So if you want the background color to be present when you are adding the space, then you should use padding. If you want it to be white, then you should use just margin. Also, similar to margin, padding also has padding right, padding left, padding bottom, and just plain padding, which will add padding to all sides. Remove the padding top. And you can see on the bottom also there's a padding of 50 pixels on the left hand side and as well as on the right hand side, but it's not visible. If the text was long, you would see that it would split the line from here. Let's just do that to make sure that, yeah, padding is working. I'll just copy paste it, this text multiple times, and you can see that the text goes rightmost by a margin of, by a padding of 50 px. So that's it. Now you have a basic understanding of the width property. You already knew the text align property, the height property. You can set the color using the background property. You can set the color of the text using the color property. And then you also have an understanding of padding and margin. So now we know how to define the structure of a website and also how to style it to make it look good. Now you will be introduced to a CSS library named Bootstrap. Some really enthusiastic people have created some predefined CSS classes, which are very handy and frequently used. This makes the development of a website faster and also preempts some bugs which you might introduce if you were to write the classes from scratch. We will first see how we can change the background, text color, align text, and set the padding and margin using Bootstrap instead of CSS. Also, we will understand a great functionality given by Bootstrap, namely Bootstrap Container. You can read about Bootstrap on the link given in the description and currently visible on the screen. The documentation is really good. Unlike C++, some of you might have read the docs. The docs seem pretty uninviting, but the docs of Bootstrap are really well designed and help you in finding out what Bootstrap really is. So fine, let's start to how to import Bootstrap in your HTML code. So first of all, I'll go back to the code we were using. Let's just move this or comment this right now. Cool. So now I'll open this in the Chrome browser. It's already open. I'll refresh it and you can see everything is gone because it's commented. To comment, you can put these symbols to comment. Or in an editor, you can press Ctrl plus / and it will automatically comment all your lines. So let's start by importing Bootstrap. Earlier you saw that I googled Bootstrap CDN and could get the link for the library. First of all, let's talk about what CDN actually is. CDN means Content Distribution Network. So I'll explain to you what Content Distribution Network means. So Bootstrap is a library. Now everyone around the world is using that library. Everyone also wants that their website should be as fast as possible. It has been noticed that people, even if they have to wait a bit of time, let's say in seconds, then they do not actually visit the web page. So everyone wants their web page to be as fast as possible. So if people are using the Bootstrap library, and it's usually imported inside the head, so the library should load very fast. For that, let's say I'm now sitting in India and the Bootstrap library is on a server in US. It would take a lot of time for the library to get from US to India compared to if the server was directly in India. So what Bootstrap does is there are multiple servers around the world in every country. Now Bootstrap has placed its code in all those servers, and whenever I try to access it, if I am in US, then I'll get the code present in the US server. If I'm in India, I'll get the code from the Indian server. That actually increases the response time by a lot, and that's what a CDN does. So now we'll see how we can import the library from the CDN. As you saw earlier, I'll just go in the drop down, select this HTML, and add this to the head. This is the CSS code. Next, I'll copy the JavaScript code also. Even though we have yet not learned how to use JavaScript, but JavaScript is the one which adds the logic behind your code. So Bootstrap has both libraries, CSS and JavaScript. That is what we are importing right now. So I've imported both libraries. Let's reload. Obviously nothing would happen because just the libraries have been imported. We haven't actually used them. Now let's see how to use Bootstrap to make your website look good instead of CSS. I'll try to recreate this code, the one you are seeing here right now. So it's not, yeah. So we'll try to make this using Bootstrap instead of using CSS. I'm commenting it right now. Yeah, let's start. First, we'll create a div. But instead of applying a text align center CSS property, we'll apply a class which has the name text center. Next, we'll add a heading to this. This is a header. I'll save it. So you can see this header is centered now because we added the class text center to this div. So all the elements which are inside this div would have the property text center. Now what does text center do? It sets the text align to center. Where is this code written? This code is written inside the CSS library we imported from Bootstrap. So next, the image source setting the width and the height would require CSS. As Bootstrap can't define exactly that 100 pixels would make this class or 200 pixels would make that class. So for this, you would be requiring CSS. But if you want to set the background to be, let's say, some dark color, then Bootstrap has defined a class for that. Let's say we want BG dark. And this is a dark background with red text. Yeah. And for making it a red text, we'll add text danger. Yeah. So now you can see that the background is black here because we set BG background dark class. And the text danger means it will give a red color. If I had set it to text primary, let's say, then it would give a blue color. For Bootstrap, primary means a blue color. Success would mean a green color. Yeah. So that is how you can use Bootstrap classes to set the color of the background, the color of the text, and center align a text. Next, if you want the background to be blue, then as I said earlier, you have to set the class BG primary. If you want your text to be white, then the class is text white. Let's add some text to it. This is another. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, it has a blue background and the text is white colored. Moreover, it's on the left aligned side because the division, we had the text center for the first division, but not for the second division. Similarly, we can also add padding and margin using Bootstrap. So what Bootstrap has done is they have created some fixed levels of padding and margin. Let's see what they are. So you can do a P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. Let's see how it looks on every level. So P1 would actually add a padding to all the sides. So the blue thickness level would increase. Let's refresh it. Yeah. So you can see P1 has added the padding in all the directions. Let's do a P2. You can see the padding increased. Just directly go to P5 and the padding has increased a lot. If you just want to add the padding to, let's say, the top, then you can do padding top, PT5. Just refresh it and you can see now the padding is only on the top. If you want it on the left, then we have to do P left 5, L5. Save this and refresh and you can see now the padding is just on the left hand side. We can't actually see the right hand side padding right now because it won't make any changes, but yeah, the right padding is also there. And similarly, PB would give a bottom padding of 5. Now, there is one more functionality that if you add TY5, then both the top and the bottom would get a padding of 5. Similarly, if you do PX5, then you would get a padding of 5 in the X direction. You can also do PX, PY3, so you get a padding of 3 in the unit direction, Y direction, and 5 in the X direction. That is how you can increase your padding using Bootstrap. Similarly, for margin, if I used, let's say, MX, right, then you would see a margin of 5 coming from the left and the right because I have set the direction of the margin to be X. If I just wanted it on the left hand side, Then I can say ML5 and the margin is only on the left hand side. If I set it to M5, then the margin would be present on all the sides. So you can see there's a margin on the top. You can't see the margin on the bottom because there is too much space, but on the left and right, there is a margin. Yeah, so that's how we use Bootstrap inbuilt classes to apply style to your HTML without using any CSS. You still might need to use CSS for defining your custom styles, your custom classes, and that's fine. You can use your custom classes along with Bootstrap, and Bootstrap just contains some frequently used classes. So you don't need to keep on writing the same thing again and again. One of the most important functionality provided by Bootstrap is the Bootstrap grid system. For now, I'll delete all this code. I have imported the Bootstrap library. I'll keep it as such. Let's change it to Bootstrap grid. So if I change the title here, you can see that the text present in the tab has also changed. Next, I'll show you what exactly Bootstrap grids are and how you can use them to make your website look cool. I'll just write the code and explain it to you. Yeah. So this is the basic structure of a Bootstrap container or grid. So first, we have a container. Inside that, we have a row, and inside the row, we have a column. And may explain it to you why we should use these containers. First, I'll show you an example. Yeah, so this is how Bootstrap grid looks. You can use the Bootstrap grid to define like how much space your content should take and at what position in the website. Bootstrap grids makes it really easy to define where the content should be and also how it should look on a mobile phone or an iPad or a laptop screen or a big desktop screen. So let's see how to use Bootstrap to achieve that. First of all, I'll just make a basic code here so that you all can understand what exactly is going on. First column, then we have the second column, and then we have the third column. So there is one row and three columns inside the container. Let's see how it will look. Yeah, this is how it looks. So there is a container and there are three columns inside the container with one row. You can't see actually the grids. So to make sure you can see that, I'll add a background color to each column. I'll add a BG danger to the column, not to the row. Next, I'll add a BG primary, let's say, and a BG doc. Sure. Cool. I'll make the text white also so that it's visible. Yeah. So you can see now that there are three columns, one row, and each column contains this text. Let's say you want to center align the text. So you can add text center to the entire row. And yeah, all the text is now centered. Let's say you want to add some padding to the top of this row. So what should you do? You can add padding of 3. Padding top of 3. Cool. So now the row has a padding on the top. If you had added this padding to the columns, then the colors would also have been there. Let's see how it would have looked. Yeah, so now the colors, the padding has been added to the columns. So the background color is also present. I just was revising padding a bit. Let's get back to what containers really are. So you can use this container to set how your content should look like in the screen. Let's say you want to add an image to the first column, let's say some information about yourself in the second column, and your resume in the third column. You can do this by using this container. Let's see how to get more control over these columns. The first thing you'll notice is that if you keep on decreasing the size of the window, then there are some subtle changes. First of all, when the window size is really large, there is a huge gap or margin to the container. And I keep on decreasing it, the margins also decreases linearly. The content size remains unchanged. But after a certain point, you can see that the content also shrinks. So this was a breakpoint after which the content also becomes less. But all the columns are still taking 1/3 of the size of the container. And there is a margin to the container. Next, let's decrease it further. You can see the margin is linearly decreasing here still. And after a certain threshold, the margin increases but the content width decreases. Again, if we keep on decreasing it, the margin is decreasing linearly and the content again decreased after a checkpoint. After a certain checkpoint, the margin becomes 0. So the margin is now 0 and the content is taking 100% of the width of the browser. And if we keep on decreasing it, it will keep on decreasing the width of the. You can now see that this container is responsive in the sense that it responds to the type of screen the user has. But what if you have an image in the first column and you want it not to shrink beyond a certain point? Maybe you want that the second and third column should actually come down as the second and the third row instead of the behavior it displays right here. If you had an image in the first column, it would have become really small right now. Let's actually add an image in the first column to get an idea. Yeah, so I've added this image, but as you can see, it's going beyond the width of the column. What I'll do is I'll add a style CSS to it, saying the width should be 100% of its parent. So if I refresh it now, yeah, now you can see there is some padding. So the image cannot take the entire column, but that's fine for us now. If we keep on decreasing it, you'll see that the image also has shrunk. Yeah, but let's say you want this AI logo to not go beyond this size. So how you should do it? Let's see how to do it. Currently, I have defined a container, a row, and a column. And inside the column, we have an image. Let's remove this PG danger for now. Yeah. What I want now is that after a certain point, this image should not decrease beyond that point. Instead of using just col, which basically what it does is it gives an equal amount of width to all the columns. I'll say I'm going to use col medium 4. I'll explain it to you what exactly this is First, let's see what it actually does. Let's refresh it. And now you can see that the image has come on the first row. The second and the third column are actually the second and the third row. Let's increase the width of the browser. And you can see after a certain point, it goes back to behaving normal. So beyond a certain point, the columns would come down in a row, whereas after a certain point, they remain as columns. That's really useful because for a mobile view, let's see how in the mobile it would look. So it's not actually working. I can set some other things to make it work, but in a mobile view, this would make AI come on top and these two columns would come in the bottom. Let's see why that's not happening. Just a moment. Okay, yeah. So I understood what the problem is. We'll come back to why this is not happening when we are making our own homepage. There I'll have to explain it to you what a meta tag is and how it helps you to see how your website would look good on a mobile browser also. You actually just have to add one line of code. So just a moment. So I've copied the code and I'll be adding it here. What this basically does is it tells that if the mobile is there, then you should make even that responsive. Now I've just reloaded it. Now it does not look any different in a browser. But if I go to the mobile view, you can see now it looks like the way we expected. In a mobile view, the AI is coming as one row and the second and the third column are actually the second and the third row. This tag is the one which actually does it. If I comment it and I reload this page, then you'll see it's behaving a bit weird. We come to what meta tags are. Meta tags are actually basically, they tell some information to the browser about the HTML page. You can add a lot of meta information. So this is one of them, which makes the browser understand that it should, how it should behave when using a browser which is on the mobile. So cool. So now we have seen how a call MD4 actually does the work what we wanted. Now, how does it do it? So MD here means medium. So the breakout we wanted, the break checkpoint is medium. So Bootstrap has already defined some checkpoints for us. Medium means 768 pixels. So if the width of the screen decreases beyond 768 pixels, then this behavior is achieved. Or if I use, let's say, Excel, then Excel means that there is a different checkpoint beyond which this behavior would be achieved. The different checkpoint is 992 pixels. You don't need to memorize this, but the point is now you can see even on such a big width screen, we are getting the behavior that the image is on the first row and the second and third column are on the second and third row. If I keep on increasing the width, then you can see the normal behavior. Well, the checkpoint has increased. Yeah. Similarly, for we have an Excel, then we have MD, we have LG for large, and we have SM for small. For extra small, we have XS. These are all different checkpoints. You can have a look at them in the docs. Where we have explained what a container is, what a container SM, SMB, There can be a container which is small, large, and medium also. You'll not have a look. You can have a look at the documentation to understand what having a small container or medium container means. And you can see the checkpoints available here. That is what Bootstrap grids do. I'll show you some more examples so that you can get familiar with Bootstrap. So first of all, let's change the, one more information that I wanted to say is that what this 4 means. So Bootstrap assumes that there are 12 columns in our screen. I don't know why they chose 12, not 10, but they have preferred the number 12. So now, if you want to have 3 columns, you have to set that each column should take a width of 4. Let's set it to MB. Now you can see this. Now, if you set the width of this column to be 2, let's say, then it will only take half of the screen. Each division is now taking 2 columns. As there are a total of 12 columns, half of the screen is occupied. So you can set the number here to specify how many columns your content should take. So let's revise a bit, and then we'll see one more feature of Bootstrap. So I've just copy pasted it. What I'm doing is I'm changing it from 2 to 4. If I just change the first column to 4, you can see that this image has 4 columns, but the second and the third column actually have 2 columns in the imaginary Bootstrap grid. If I change all of them to 4, we will take the entire width of the container. Next, I'll copy it once more. And instead of setting call MD4, I'll just set it as call. This ensures that all of the columns will take same width for whatever be the width of the screen. Let's see how they work differently when the screen width reduces. Yeah, I'll reduce it a bit. You can see the first one decreases as was expected. The second one also behaves the same way as the first one. That's because even though we had set the column as MD2, so ideally you might have thought that there's some white gap coming for the space, which, just a second. So there is a white space here, there is a gap here. So when this comes down, you might have expected that a blank space in the row would also come. And I kept decreasing this. This would have gone below this, third column would have come here, and there are white space, but that does not happen. So if the container, if the column is empty, then Bootstrap does not actually show it when it comes down in the row. That's a really nice property, because if there would have been spaces because of the empty columns, then this content would have come really down, and that's not what we want. Next, you can see, even if we have made the width as small as possible, the third container is taking the is splitting all the columns into equal width. It's not actually pushing the first column into a row and the second column in another row and so on. That's because we have not specified the breakpoint. So that's it about Bootstrap grids. It might seem confusing at first, but it's really easy to understand once you get a hang of how to use it. And one more interesting factor which comes in, let's see, I'll just delete these. All MD4 version. Let's refresh. That's working. Let's say we want some text below this image. Now, to add a text, we can add another row and add a text just below this. Let's do that. I'll add another row to this container. In the first row, I'll specify some caption. Let's see how it will look. Oh, it looks cool, right? So there is some caption also below this image. All of them are center aligned because we set the text center to the row. We can also set this text center to the container itself. This will make the entire container to be centered. Yeah, that's working. But now there is actually a problem. What if the width of the screen starts shrinking? Now this is a problem, right? The sum caption actually came below the second and the third column. So the second column was pushed below the image, the third column was pushed below the image, and then we got some caption in another row. That's bad. That's not what we wanted. So how could we do this? So some of you might have guessed it. We can add another row inside this column. And then we can add another row. Let's add some caption text here. Let's delete this. Let's see now what happens. So now the sum caption is not actually text centered because we have not added the column class to it. Always remember, inside a row, there should always be a column. You should never actually put directly your content inside the column, inside the row. Let's see if this works. And yes, the text is now center aligned. So always remember this. Never put your content directly inside the row. Always put a column inside the row and then your content. And now our caption is now inside the same column, but on a different row. So if we keep on decreasing it, so our sum caption comes below the image as we wanted it. If we wanted some margin to be there below the sum caption part, you can just add here that below this row, there should be a margin of 5, margin bottom 5. And you can see there's a margin also coming, which won't be visible in this. It's actually visible beyond this row, there's a margin. Beyond this, if you want the margin to come below this column, you can add this margin bottom 5 to the column itself. Yeah, that's how it looks. Cool. So that's it for Bootstrap containers. The main thing is that we can divide the website and then place our content on how it should be, while the Bootstrap automatically makes it responsive. And so guys, now let's have a mentorship session on Zoom. The link has been sent in the mail. Kindly join and clear all your doubts.